forest bodies. Hopefully I don't need to add this disclaimer, but some of those images are pretty disturbing, or could be, just because we've been doing this podcast for so long. But dead bodies don't really creep me out that much.
This is right up there with body farms.
Mm-hmm.
And have you ever looked at images from body farms?
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about the ones where they just leave them laying out in the brush.
Yeah,
for a while.
to figure out what happens. This was very much in line with the imagery I've seen from that, and I think it's the same thing as we've looked at it enough.
Yeah.
I'll show you a picture later on of one body that really will creep you out.
Okay.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
The forest is really, really lush. It's really, if you don't know what's going on in this forest, it's really beautiful. If you just look at pictures of the Jukai, it's just kind of breathtaking. It is genuinely, if you saw Spirited Away or Princess Mononoke, it looks like the forests from those movies. It really, really does. So, because of the lushness of this forest, bodies are very often missed. Less these days, because people have started, people who are hesitant to kill themselves will take trail tape with them. You know, that like nylon trail tape that you see tied around tree branches sometimes. Yeah. They'll take that and they'll tie one end around a tree and they'll just like flow it behind them in a straight line.
So they won't get lost?
Yeah, so they won't get lost. So often that leads to something.
Well, and it is. I know you're going to talk about this, but it's really easy to get lost in this forest.
Oh, it's really easy. Yeah, it's super, super easy. The most common way that people kill themselves is they either the first most common is hanging, and the second most common is taking sleeping pills. But
is there any? Do you know? Is there a male-female ratio there? I almost imagine that men would be more likely to hang themselves than women.
From what I've heard, it's not so much a male-female ratio, it's a determined and not determined ratio. So the people who are determined will not mark their trail in, and they hang themselves.
Okay.
So hanging bodies or nooses with skeletons underneath are often found years and years and years later because there's no trail marking.
Yeah, you can't get to it, okay.
Versus the fresher bodies that they find are often marked by a trail, and they're not hung, they've taken sleeping pills, and then it takes them a while to die from exposure. Because they're too weak from taking the sleeping pills. It doesn't kill them.
Yeah.
But they're too weak.
It can kill you.
It can, but it turns out that the people often, it doesn't. People don't take quite enough in the forest.
People tend to overestimate, and it's probably the fault of movies, how many pills it takes to actually make that
And they
happen.
actually have, this is really, really creepy, but they have suicide manuals that they come out with in Japan that they'll find on a lot of these bodies that tells people how to kill themselves in the Jukai.
Really?
Yeah, it's really creepy. Yeah, and it says either hang yourself or take sleeping pills. Yeah.
But, okay, all right.
Okay.
I was going to make some joke about, killing your readership, but never mind.
No. And I guess the third most common way to die in the forest is just by basic exhaustion, dehydration, or malnourishment. This is due to something we're going to talk about in a minute that's called ubatse, but it's a traditional practice in Japan. Traditional? I hesitate to call it traditional, but it is. I have a number of Japanese friends, and when I was talking to them about this story, I mentioned ubatse, and they said, oh, does that happen there? Like, that's a thing that happens a lot, so... You're looking at me, you know where we're going with it.
I do.
But apparently, the people of Japan, at least the people that I know from Japan, believe that this is a thing that legitimately happens. So,
all right,
we'll leave it at that for a minute.
Okay.
It's not happening anymore, though, right?
Well, maybe.
Well, okay.
Hard to tell.
Okay.
So I'm assuming besides bodies, because the story has gotten enough traction, there's other stuff that's being found?
There's lots of other stuff. And,
Which is weird.
Visitors do describe the forest as being unnaturally silent.
Well,
as if all life has abandoned the forest intentionally. I've watched some videos of people walking through, and you can hear birds and things like that, but it is really muffled. Kind of as, when you have the first snow, at least in Portland. I know places
really
that get a
quiet.
lot of snow don't have this as much because the plows are out immediately, but it gets really quiet and muffled, and that's the truth of this forest as well. And a lot of people do leave stuff behind, like you said. There's ice and snow a lot of the time in the forest, and I don't know why people would leave a lot of this stuff behind, like shoes of all sizes. get left behind, including children's shoes. And it's not like, that kid dropped his shoe, better leave it.
Because he was in a stroller.
Pairs of shoes lined up, which is weird.
Mm-hmm.
There's people leave packs of photos, children's toys. There's a really interesting, I don't know if you guys got to watch the Vice video that I posted.
No.
For the
I
link.
think I saw
It's
that.
really, really interesting. They follow a Japanese geologist who's part of the suicide patrols that go out there that I don't think I've mentioned yet, but I'm going to mention in a minute. And he kind of explains things, but they find this stuffed animal that's kind of a humanoid figure that's been nailed upside down to a tree and kind of like cut open, and then there was a curse that was nailed into the inside of him. They find that while they're wandering around. So you kind of have the sense that that's the sort of thing that's around a lot.
This is kind of like getting into Blair Witch territory.
A little.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are a couple theories about why people go here to kill themselves.
Why it's so popular?
Why it's so popular.
Okay.
And ubatse plays a role in it. Ubatse it literally translates to the leaving of an old woman.
Oh, yeah.
And it's this rumored Japanese tradition, although tradition I don't think is the right word.
Practice,
I guess, of leaving a family member who's very old or ill in a place to die, basically. If somebody is a burden on the family, you take them out into a forest or some other deserted area and leave them to die so that they are no longer a burden to you.
Nice.
As I said, there's not a whole... As far as I can tell, this is not a thing that actually ever happened.
In Japanese culture isn't the only place that I've heard of this kind of thing.
Other cultures, but
other cultures talk about taking the old out or the old wandering away when they decide that they become a bird.
Yeah,
that's kind of back in the way back days, like when we were living in the Stone Age.
In the way back.
In the way back.
Yeah. There's a larger conversation to be had here about the traditional treatment of seniors in Japan and the fact that Japanese seniors have a much higher rate of suicide than seniors in the rest of the world, or the average rate of suicide in the rest of the world, but we're not going to dive into that so much.
Yeah, they haven't kept stats on the age of the people that they find out in their bodies out here, right?
No, they
haven't really kept stats other than numbers for the most part, it sounds like.
Yeah. But even though I'm not totally willing to say that ubatse is a real thing, let's assume it is. And we can say that because it is, vengeful spirits from the family members who have been left behind haunt the Jukai and call people in. That's a good theory, right? Alternately, vengeful spirits from samurai who killed themselves in feudal times.
Did they all go to the forest to kill themselves?
I don't think so, but that's a theory.
It smacks of so many bad Hollywood movies where there's the house or the woods that are filled with evil spirits that draw people in. I mean, it makes me think of Evil Dead with Bruce Campbell. You know, the house it draws them in and does crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's completely believable.
Next theory that has the exact same smack to it is the Uri, which are demon ghosts. Also, maybe the Buddhist monk, which is a demon ghost. There have been reports of people seeing a Buddhist monk wandering the forest.
I love this.
And some people claim to have even spoken with him. He asks people wandering the forest why they're there, and he tells them how to get out of the forest. He gives them, there's the trail over there.
Directions.
Basically, yeah. If they say, oh my gosh, you're right, I don't want to kill myself. I don't think... Oh, yeah, actually, I guess I did mention that there's a corps of volunteers that goes out to try and find people who haven't yet committed suicide.
No, you talked about the people who go out and look for the bodies.
Oh, they are also trying to find people who are out there who might be about to commit suicide. And try to talk them out of it, not in like a, oh, you have so much to live for, blah, blah, blah. This is another thing you get to see in that Vice video, because the gentleman that they're following is part of this corps. And they do find somebody, and he just kind of sits there and talks to him for a couple minutes. He says, what are you doing out here? You're not allowed to camp out here. Okay, well, do you have food and water? Okay, well, I just want you to think really hard about what's going on. It was really nice to meet you. Okay. bye, basically. It's not like you have so much to live for and don't kill yourself and blah, 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 blah. It's more of a, let's have an honest human interaction with each other, and hopefully that will discourage you from doing whatever you're thinking about doing.
And cluttering up our forest with corpses.
Anyways, the reason that I bring this up is it turns out one of the people that's very active in this is a man by the name of Shaozin Yamashita, who is a Jodo Shinshu priest. It's a sect of Buddhism, and Yamashita Jushaku is one of those monks, and he does dress in the traditional robes. It's not the bright orange robes,
Tibetan
yellowish
monks
robe.
that everybody's familiar with.
Yeah, they're dark robes, but they are traditional. You could go out and Google it if you want. They're kind of big, dark, flowing robes. So, I think it's pretty possible that people are freaked out in the middle of the forest and have a real encounter and go back and talk to their friends, and they say, yeah, I talked to a monk in the middle of the forest, and people are like, you're crazy. That's not a real thing. You probably saw a ghost.
I can very easily see that in a forest where it's super weird and creepy and you're on your own, or it's just the two of you, and suddenly a monk, which is not something I think you would normally expect to run across in a forest, suddenly shows up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Be a little strange.
Yes. Next up is the Kuroi Jukai book, which is by Saicho Matsumoto, who's a very famous Japanese novelist. He's written just an absurd amount of novels and books and poems and things like that. He's very, very famous, but he wrote this book. It came out in, I think it was 1960. Some things I read said 1962. It's not in print in English, and despite my clearly flawless Japanese pronunciation, I do not actually read kanji or katakana, and that's the only way that you can get information about this book. I did find a Wikipedia page on this book, and it was in Japanese, and I said, hey, Chrome, translate this page into English. And I literally could not make the English words that appeared on the page make sense to my American brain. There were some very, very interesting things that happened, and I know I mentioned to you guys, I was talking to one of my Japanese friends, and I said, can you just read the synopsis and tell me what this book is about? And she kind of looked at it for a minute and said, no. So
she read it in Japanese?
She read it in Japanese, and there are two different ways that that this book could be, and it's also possible that it's like there are a lot of Japanese concepts that don't translate very well into English.
Yes.
So it's possible that she just was like, stop. And I don't really want to try and explain this to you. But as far as I can tell, this book is either about a woman who kills herself in the forest because of kind of a star-crossed to lover, forbidden love situation, or about a woman whose sister dies in a bus accident. And she won't leave her sister, and then she tries to take over her sister's job, or maybe there's like an evil spirit that possesses the sister. It's hard to tell. If you want to run this experiment, please be my guest. Go out in your English-speaking brain and find the Wikipedia page and try and Google Translate it, and then if you can figure out what it means, tell me, please. But apparently it was a very, very popular book in Japan. Many people read it and thought, hey, that's a cool place to kill myself.
Because at some point at the end, she commits suicide in the
forest. Yeah, as far as I can tell.
In that particular forest.
In the Jukai, yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. As far as I can tell. And then my final theory is that it could just be a really pretty place to die.
A nice serene place to go kill yourself.
It's really beautiful. It's really quiet. There's a lot of really secluded spaces. You don't have to look at anybody. Somebody's not going to stumble upon you. And it's
not like going to a campsite or something.
Yeah, and it also, not to be macabre or anything, but it saves your family and friends from having to find you. It's a pretty much 100% guaranteed that your family and friends aren't going to be the ones who stumble upon your body in the middle of this forest.
No.
Somebody else is going to, and they're going to, if you're still recognizable, they will tell your family what happened to you and where it happened. I have never really contemplated suicide, but I can see where the draw could come from that.
Well, but of course, and I think that the people who are in that situation don't think of is the exact opposite side of that, which is you're unrecognizable, you cannot be identified, which means your loved ones then live on forever wondering what happened to you.
Yeah.
There's always the other side of the coin.
Yeah, they I'm sure they leave a note behind saying, I'm going to go off myself.
Oh, maybe.
For their family before they had to strike out to the forest. Well, I have another theory, which is that these are suicidal people. They go out to the forest to do it because they're animal lovers. They figure, I'll not only kill myself, but I'll leave a nice little tasty meal for all the animals.
Kind of like an air funeral.
Yeah.
In that Vice video, not to refer too much to it. This is the third time now. Sorry.
Hey, what about that Vice video?
Yeah. No, but the guy that they're following, he says they find this little area where there's a bunch of flowers and a box of chocolates, and he says, oh, it must have been the family and friends of this person who died. And he said, I think it's a really beautiful reminder that you're never alone. Even if you think you're alone, you're not. So there's that. That's the up note to remind ourselves of this story.
I really don't know how I'm going to follow that act. Because, wow.
It's going to be an upper.
I hope so.
Do you have something?
I read that before you started. I read a fun little piece of trivia regarding this, which is that the work crews that have to go out and get the bodies and bring them in, they take them down to the police station, I think, and they have a special room just for the suicides.
Yep.
They put him in there and put the body in there, and then they have to Rochambeau to see who gets to spend the night in the room with the body. Because apparently it's bad mojo that to just
leave them alone.
Leave the body alone.
Yeah.
So somebody has to stay with the body all night.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that'd be one you'd hate to lose.
If it was a pile of bones, then it's okay. If it's anything otherwise.
It's a rotting corpse.
You have to sit there with it.
Fun times.
I don't know. From the living perspective, it's kind of a gnarly job, but from the ideology of it, it's kind of sweet.
No,
you don't want to leave the spirit alone.
Yeah, no.
You want to usher it in.
I would agree with that.
It's a nice sentiment.
Yeah, it
The
is.
sentiment is that. It's a good way to put it.
Can we stop talking about suicide?
Please.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody, we're done.
We're gonna
Let's talk about something else.
I think we lied to people. It's been a little more. It might have been a little more than 20 minutes.
We'll
but
just
that's okay.
edit a new time
We're going to
stamp
talk
in.
about a new one.
Yeah.
So, Steve, do you have an exciting, terrible place for us?
I do have what is a beautiful but terrible place.
I know this.
Just like me.
Yeah, but for completely different reason is it a terrible place.
Okay.
Well, not so much a terrible place as a scary place.
Yeah.
But yeah. There's a lot of fear involved here. Let's go ahead. The place that I don't think that any of our listeners should be going. It's one that randomly catches on fire.
Yeah, I guess that seems like a bad thing.
Yeah, it's kind of a bad thing.
Not the whole place doesn't catch on fire.
No, it's not Pompeii or anything like that. We're talking about the village of Caronia. It's on the island of Sicily, which it's east of. If you know the island at all, it's east of Palermo.
And Sicily is Italy.
Sicily is Italy.
In case somebody didn't know that.
Oh, I
don't know.
thought I said Italian village. If I didn't, it's an Italian village.
Sorry.
Yeah.
It's a pretty little coastal town, from the photos and everything. It's exactly what you'd picture a coastal town on the island of Sicily to look like. It's built up into the hills a little bit. It's really nice.
I've shown you pictures of Goriano.
Yeah.
Sicily, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's very picturesque.
Oh, it is. I did my usual thing and did a little street tour on Google.
I did too.
It's
beautiful.
A neat little town.
It was actually really hard to drive around in Google Street View, though, because it's one of those weird little towns where it looks like the street keeps going, but the road doesn't.
The street does because you can walk on it.
Yeah. I was like, why won't you go there? Oops, never mind.
And by the way, the streets in this village are not like what you're used to thinking of as streets. They're more kind of like alleys.
They're very small.
They're very skinny.
Yeah, it's a traditional village.
Yeah, and lots of little weird underpasses.
Switchbacks and all of that good stuff. But enough talking about this beautiful little place. Let's talk about the story.
Okay.
Let's talk about why you should be scared to go there. Not just because of the mafia.
We really undersold this so far. The story begins somewhere in the beginning of January of 2004 when randomly things literally started catching on fire. Lots of things.
Like what?
Like physical things.
Tell us.
Okay, here's a list of things according to the media reports. Because this is the difficulty with this one, is most of it is media reports. And I did the same thing. I was putting stuff into Chrome and getting it translated, and it makes it a little rough. Here's the things that catch on fire. There's furniture. There's electronics, like TVs or microwave, stuff like that. Or computers would have their memories randomly wiped.
What?
That's a kind of an odd twist on the whole electronics bit. Parked cars would either just be on fire, or the glass would implode into the car from some kind of weird heat source. The doors, electric doors on cars, the locks, they would go on and off, open and close, or lock and unlock constantly.
Weird.
And there's electronic gates that would randomly open and close on their own. So you'd just be walking up the street, and then the gates up ahead would open and then close and then open and then close.
Weird.
Sounds like the whole town got hacked.
It kind of does.
Yeah.
I've even seen a photo of what it looks like. It was a water tank on a wall. So if you imagine if you're from the States, you've got your toilet tank. It's almost like that shape, that square shape of but as a water tank with a pipe coming down, and it looks like the whole thing had caught fire. A water tank and a water pipe looked like they had caught on fire.
It wasn't a toilet tank?
No.
Of a toilet?
No, it wasn't.
Sure?
Because there were pipes running away from it, and it was kind of cropped, but the pipe took an angle.
Okay.
In what I saw. So I'm pretty sure it wasn't somebody was smoking on the john.
Sure.
Now, of course, at first, when things are going up, especially the electronics are catching on fire, people started unplugging things.
Yeah, and there were other things like appliances, like toasters and stuff too, right?
Yeah, appliances, things in general that plugged in were catching on fire. So people were unplugging them.
Logically.
And the power company would eventually cut off the electricity. That, however, didn't stop the problem. One of the famous pictures you see is a hairdryer hanging on the wall, the cord looped up next to it, not plugged into anything, and the dryer on fire.
What?
Which is really weird.
That's a little weird. Now, did the owner of the hairdryer like take a picture of it or something?
Somebody had a picture of it as it was catching, flames were coming out of it. Yes, It almost looked like they had stuck it in the towel rack. There was no towel, but they'd stuck it in the towel rack itself. And so you could see the wires, looped up around it, and the head of it had flames coming out of it.
That's bizarre.
Yeah, that's a hell of a hairdryer.
Yeah.
Let's see. There's other weird things that were going on in this village at the same time. People were reporting seeing glowing orbs over the ocean because, as we said, it's right on the ocean. And they also reported that there were UFOs flying just off the coastline. So this is a nice little addition to the, oh, by the way, everything I own is catching on fire.
Yeah.
How many different people reported things catching on fire?
I don't have a clear sense. I'll say this now. I don't have a clear sense of how much stuff caught on fire. I don't have a clear sense of how long things caught on fire for. We're going to talk about this in a sec, but there's the time frames and the descriptions lead me to either believe that it was a short time frame, say like a month, or years that this stuff kept happening. But
But eventually it stopped, right?
I don't know that for sure. I believe that it stopped, but I don't know that for sure because the reporting is so, like, even the English versions of things, not the translated, but the English versions are vague. So I'm not positive if it stopped. I have to imagine that for the most part it stopped. But and some of this will be covered in theories.
Okay.
For the time frame, about a week of fires had happened. They evacuated the town, and
did they evacuate it right away? I thought
it was after about a week or so.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was after about a week. Well, again, this depends on the accounting. Some say it was after 2 or 4 weeks they evacuated. Some say after 17 fires. Like, again, it's never an exact number, but they evacuated the town. Government brings in every expert that they can think of. They run tests on things that have been burned. They put up cameras all over the town to try and figure out what's going on. The odd bit to me is that as soon as the government swoops in and starts doing all of this, the fire stopped.
That's intriguing, huh?
Nothing caught, according to the government reports, nothing caught on fire while they were there. And they couldn't figure out what was going on. So eventually the people are like, hey, I'd like to go home, please.
Yeah.
So eventually they say, okay, well, we can't figure it out. Go ahead and go home. And the fires at that point, this is what I got to earlier, sporadically seem to start happening again.
Weird.
Here's some other weird things that then happened after that is water pipes begin to leak and burst. The pipes under your sink or whatever. There's some theories on that we can talk about in a bit. Let's see what else we've got. There is, this is, Devin's gonna, I know you love this.
Yeah.
There's farmers in the area who grow eggplants. And according to their reports, all of their eggplants change colors. Not, they as eggplants will do, they
Not
change
in the
from one
way.
color to another color when they're ripe. They all change to different colors.
I was reading through the script and I was kind of skimming. I missed this part and I was reading through the theories and it says the eggplant.
For everything.
Apparently,
Yeah,
Steve has lost it.
So these things, but these eggplants didn't just change to one odd color; they changed to multiple different colors.
That is what the reporting that I've seen said.
Mysterious.
And I'm going to put that in doubt because that seems a bit fantastical.
A little bit.
We'll talk about that a little bit in the theory section, but I actually did some research on eggplants, just trying to figure out what's going on.
Yeah, in the eggplant section.
In the eggplant section of the grocery store aisle, yes. Let's see, we also have, there's some other weird stuff. And this is another vegetation thing. There's a local grass called the Mauritanian grass.
Yeah, Mauritanian.
Thank you.
Mauritanian.
Yeah, and it's a big grass, so not like your lawn. This is a grass that grows 8 feet high in a big
Have you
bushy
seen my
thing.
lawn lately?
Your lawn is brown and scorched. It is not tall.
Yeah.
Unlike these plants, which are super tall. What this plant has in common with your lawn is that it was scorched.
Brown and scorched.
Yeah.
It was the plant at ground level showed signs of burning, but it wasn't as if it had ever caught on fire. It was more of a smoldering heat kind of look. And I don't know how they figured this out, but I guess somebody would start digging them up, is the roots were blackened as if they had been burned.
Now that's odd.
It is, and the last thing that I'll put in here is people have said that from that time or during that time that compasses weren't working correctly, that they were deviating from magnetic north. They were pointing somewhere else.
There's a clear UFO influence here then.
We are laying a ton of hints for the possible UFO theory right there. I will totally admit it.
Yeah, and another theory you're going to talk about too.
Yeah, and we should go ahead and just jump right into the theories.
Yeah, I think so.
Because really, that's about all of the description that we've got for this particular story. Theory number 1, the devil did it.
Well,
Satan?
Satan.
You know what we should have named this episode is Things That Nefarious Spirits Do.
Yeah, because that
That's
just rolls off the tongue.
Places you don't want to go. Things nefarious spirits. Okay, nefarious. All right, fine. No, but that's been a common thread throughout everything.
It kind of is.
Is that bad spirits are doing this thing?
Yeah. Well, okay. This is kind of a combo. It's either the devil or evil spirits, which is much like what we talked about in the forest that you had. I've got to say, the more superstitious villagers seem to fall in line with this right away. And, you know, the devil makes total sense. He comes from a really hot place. Of course he would catch on stuff on fire. It's his fault. I get why people would see that.
Although
Small Italian villages are also very religious, usually.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think though that, you know, if the devil was up to this kind of stuff, he'd be spreading the love a little bit.
You would think.
You would think.
Unless
it would just
there
be this one village.
was a very big concentration of sinners in the city, town, village.
But the devil is pro sinner. He would go to the most pious village and start fires there.
That's true.
Yeah.
Oops.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry,
well,
everyone.
Let's move away from the devil did it to the evil spirit side of this theory, because there's actually some very simple logic in this one. According to villagers, this is the way things played out, is somebody's stuff or house would start to try to catch on fire, and in an attempt to save their stuff, if they had somebody who would let them, they would take their belongings to that other person's house. So that if their house went up, at least their precious things didn't go as well. Mm-hmm. Except that, according to this, the evil spirit was actually in the possessions.
Oh.
The evil spirit was causing the fire, was in a possession. That possession is brought into the new house. The spirit then jumps from the newly transported item to an item that had resided there previous to its arrival. So now it's jumped into the new home.
Okay.
It's going to catch things in that house on fire. That person's going to do the same thing. Oh, I got to get my stuff out of here. Mm-hmm. Moves it to the next person's house, inadvertently passing the infection. Yeah, they're passing the infection along.
It's not a bad theory.
From a very simple perspective, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I suppose. You would think that the spirit really wouldn't need a ride over to his next place he's going to go to.
There's lazy spirits.
Yeah, I suppose.
Sit around, eat Cheetos, catch something on fire, wait for a ride, play Xbox until that happens, or short the Xbox out. One of the two. It happens.
Well, I'm totally buying into this spirit thing, but what other theories do we have?
No, I got one that you'll totally buy into.
Oh, what's that?
UFOs.
Yeah!
Yeah, okay. I said there were flying objects seen in the area, glowing orbs over the ocean, and UFOs flying in the distance. There's stories of a helicopter chasing something but never quite being able to catch it. Those sightings supposedly became a regular occurrence right about the same time that all of the fires started. So that has led people to posit that it's aliens that are causing the fires.
Of course.
That the aliens did it.
Right. Why, though?
I love this. This is hilarious to me, is that one article I read said they were doing it as a way to test how we, as a society or a group, would react and how good our response would be to a crisis like a fire. So once these pyromaniac aliens figure out how our response patterns are, they'll be able to just invade, because they'll know how to outwit us, because they'll already know what we do is a predictable pattern.
Because a small Italian village on an island
exactly
is probably the best way to test that.
Small sample size, baby. It's all about the small sample size.
I don't know, man. Seems wrong to me.
It just seems like, you'd want to, you're going to a place where, as an alien, you don't really know that these guys are representative in terms of the way they would respond to anything, right?
True.
Besides which, if they're powerful enough to set things remotely on fire, why didn't they set any people on fire?
Well, I can just imagine that it's some drone alien worker in the drone alien worker reconnaissance office saying, where am I going to put this? I don't know. All those humans sound alike. These ones sound fine. This looks like a big enough settlement. We'll use it. I mean, it could be that, or it could be that it's total hooey.
So or the aliens were like, this place has been around for a long time. It's probably the pinnacle of what's going on.
We've been watching this place for 1,000 years.
It hasn't changed, therefore it's perfect.
Yeah, exactly. Or maybe not.
Yeah.
I'm going to move on.
Yeah.
The next one the next theory is actually the plausible one in my mind.
I know, because you were bragging about it last week. You were like, the theory that I came up with is actually supported.
I would like to support it with this 17-page document that I found on the internet.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay, well, our next theory is volcanic gases.
What are volcanic gases?
Well, when you eat a lot of beans.
No.
No. Let me explain a little bit of the geography